41st millennium, there is only war. 1,000,000 worlds burn under the Emperor's watchful gaze, and faith reshapes reality itself into a weapon against the darkness. Yet even in this universe of endless carnage, where gods walk among mortals and daemons claw at the veil between worlds, some arrivals defy explanation. Some beings carry with them a darkness so profound, so meticulously crafted, that even the Imperium's most zealous servants pause to wonder. Has the Emperor sent a champion, or has something far more dangerous slipped through the cracks of reality? The forge world of Redemptus Sigma hung in the void like a mechanical prayer. Its surface a labyrinth of manufactorums, plasma refineries, and cathedral-sized furnaces that never ceased their holy work. Here, the Adeptus Mechanicus shaped the Imperium's instruments of war, and here the Omnissiah's faithful believed themselves beyond the reach of mortal concerns. They were catastrophically wrong. The anomaly registered first on the upper atmosphere auger arrays, a spatial distortion that defied conventional physics. Not a warp signature, not a conventional ship breaking from the Imperium, something else entirely. The object descended like a falling star wrapped in impossible energies, trailing what the cogitators could only describe as corrupted data in its wake. It struck the northern industrial sector with enough force to vaporize 3 city blocks and send seismic shockwaves through the planet's reinforced crust. When the dust settled and the radiation cleared, Tech Priest Delta 79 led the first expedition into the crater. His augmetic eyes processed the scene with clinical precision, a vessel of utterly alien design, its hull black as the void, and still radiating heat that made the air shimmer. The craft was small, barely larger than a Valkyrie transport, but its architecture suggested sophistication beyond standard Imperial construction. Smooth, angular surfaces, no visible rivets or welds. The machine spirit within was silent, either dead or dormant. Blessed Omnissiah, guide our understanding of this mystery. The Skitarii Rangers accompanying him maintained a perimeter, their galvanic rifles tracking potential threats. Servitors shuffled forward with sensor data, their lobotomized minds processing sensor data without fear or curiosity. The crater's edge was lined with melted rockcrete and fused metal, the ground itself transformed into black glass by the thermal bloom of impact. Then the vessel's boarding ramp lowered. Pneumatic hisses echoed across the crater as atmosphere equalized with a sound like a mechanical death rattle. Steam billowed from the opening, and through that fog emerged a figure that would haunt the dreams of every witness present for the rest of their abbreviated lives. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, encased in armor as black as the ship that delivered him. The armor bore no resemblance to anything in Imperial records, not Space Marine power armor, not Xenos battle plate, not even the Baroque designs of Chaos champions. This was something else, smooth, segmented, with a chest piece that displayed illuminated panels and switches, a flowing cape, tattered and scorched, hung from broad shoulders, but it was the helmet that commanded absolute attention. A glossy black mask with geometric angles and a pronounced faceplate, flanked by a breather apparatus that produced a rhythmic mechanical breathing sound. The sound was hypnotic, terrifying, inevitable as the grave. The figure's right hand rose slowly, and that's when Delta 79 saw the cylindrical device attached to his belt. Without warning, without any visible activation mechanism, a blade of pure crimson light erupted from the device with a snap hiss that cut through the air like a promise of violence. The blade hummed with barely contained energy, 3 feet of coherent light that cast bloody shadows across the crater. Unknown entity, you have trespassed upon the sacred domain of Mars. In the name of the Omnicia, identify yourself and submit to sacred rites of interrogation. The figure's head turned slowly, deliberately, focusing on the tech priest with mechanical precision. When he spoke, his voice emerged as a deep baritone filtered through the respirator, each word resonating with absolute authority. Where is this place? The basic Gothic was flawless, yet the accent was utterly alien, placing emphasis on syllables in patterns no human throat would naturally produce. The question itself was bizarre. How could any being capable of interstellar travel not know where they had arrived? You stand upon Redemptus Sigma, forge world of the Omnicia. The figure raised his left hand, and Delta 79's words died in his Vox synthesizer. Not from damage, not from mechanical failure. The tech priest simply found himself unable to speak, as though an invisible hand had seized his throat and squeezed. His augmetic system screamed warnings as biometric sensors detected his organic components entering respiratory distress. Around the crater's perimeter, Skitarii Rangers opened fire. Las bolts and galvanic rounds streaked toward the armored intruder with disciplined precision. The figure didn't flinch. He extended his hand, and the incoming fire simply stopped. Dozens of projectiles hung suspended in midair, caught in an invisible grip that defied every law of physics the Mechanicus held sacred. Then he clenched his fist. The ammunition reversed course at twice its original velocity. Skitarii Rangers crumpled, their armor punched through by their own weapons. Servitors sparked and collapsed, critical systems destroyed by ricocheting rounds. The entire ambush was dismantled in 3 seconds of impossible violence. Delta 79's respiratory distress ceased as abruptly as it began. He collapsed to his knees, gasping through biological lungs that his augmentations had almost forgotten how to use independently. The figure deactivated his crimson blade and surveyed the carnage with what might have been satisfaction. When he spoke again, his mechanical breathing punctuated each statement like a death knell. What is this Imperium you speak of? Before Delta 79 could formulate a response, new contacts appeared on his auspex. Inbound Aquila landers, moving fast and broadcasting inquisitorial override codes. The Ordor Exynos had been monitoring the impact site, and they were coming with far more firepower than a single tech priest expedition. Lord Vader turned toward the approaching craft, his hand drifting back to the cylinder at his belt. The mechanical breathing continued its steady rhythm, neither faster nor slower, despite the imminent confrontation. The sound promised only one thing. Whatever these inquisitors intended, they would learn the same lesson the Skitarii had discovered. In the presence of a Sith Lord, resistance was merely the prelude to submission. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions where dark lords meet darker futures, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where even Sith Lords must learn the true meaning of war. The Aquila landers touched down with engines screaming, and Inquisitor Cravus emerged with a retinue of stormtroopers, each bearing weapons consecrated against Xenos and heretic alike. The confrontation was about to begin, and Redemptus Sigma would never be the same. Inquisitor Cravus of the Ordo Xenos was a man who had stared into the faces of tyrannid hive tyrants, negotiated with Eldar Farseers, and personally executed a gene-stealer patriarch with nothing but a power sword and righteous fury. He did not frighten easily. Yet, as he approached the crater and beheld the armored figure standing among the corpses of Skitarii Rangers, something primal in his augmented nervous system screamed a warning that transcended logic. The figure radiated wrongness, not chaos corruption. Cravus had psychic wards tattooed into his very bones that would have ignited at the first touch of the warp's taint. This was something else, something colder, more mechanical in its darkness, yet paradoxically more alive than any servitor or mechanicus construct. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind," Cravus announced, his voice amplified by the voxcasters mounted on his Aquila lander, "you are commanded to surrender for interrogation. Resist, and you will be purged with extreme prejudice." The figure, this Lord Vader, turned to face him with movements that suggested both warrior discipline and supreme confidence. The mechanical breathing continued its rhythmic cycle, undisturbed by the hellguns now aimed at his center mass. "I do not surrender." The words were simple, final. "Lower your weapons or share the fate of those who preceded you." Cravus made a split-second tactical assessment. The scattered Skitarii showed no signs of conventional weapons damage. Lass burns, yes, but from their own weapons. Ballistic trajectory analysis suggested the rounds had been redirected mid-flight. Impossible without gravitic technology, and even then, the power requirements would be immense. This being possessed capabilities that defied Imperial classification, which meant he needed to be studied, dissected, and understood. "Open fire," Cravus commanded. 20 stormtroopers unleashed coordinated hellgun volleys. Superheated lass beams capable of punching through Space Marine armor converged on Vader's position with lethal precision. The Sith Lord's hand snapped up, and an invisible barrier erupted into existence. The lass beam struck something 3 feet in front of Vader and dissipated into harmless light scatter, as though hitting a force field that generated no visible energy signature. "Your weapons are crude," Vader observed. His other hand extended toward the nearest Aquila lander. The 20-ton aircraft groaned, its landing gear shrieking against rockcrete as an invisible force lifted it 5 feet into the air. He clenched his fist, and the lander's fuselage crumpled inward like parchment. Fuel cells ruptured. The craft exploded in a fireball that sent stormtroopers diving for cover. Shrapnel pinged off Cravus's refractor field, the personal shield generator barely absorbing the kinetic impact. "Pysaker," one of the stormtroopers shouted.
He's an unsanctioned—" The soldier's words became a strangled gurgle. He rose into the air, hands clawing at his throat as something crushed his windpipe from the inside. Vader didn't even look at him. The Sith Lord's attention remained fixed on Kravis, and through that black mask, the Inquisitor felt the weight of absolute judgment. "I am no witch," Vader stated, his voice cutting through the chaos with mechanical precision. "I am a Lord of the Sith, and you will tell me what I wish to know, or I will extract it from your mind." Kravis activated his neural inhibitor, a device designed to disrupt psychic manifestation through localized reality anchoring. It whined to full power, projecting a null field that should have severed any connection to the warp within a 30-foot radius. Vader's power didn't even flicker. The dying stormtrooper dropped as Vader released him, the body hitting the ground with a wet thud. 3 more soldiers opened fire with their hellguns on full automatic. Vader's hand swept in an arc, and all 3 were hurled backward by an invisible wave of force, their bodies ragdolling through the air before slamming into the crater wall hard enough to leave impact craters in the stone. "Your technology is interesting," Vader said, taking a step forward. His crimson blade ignited again with that distinctive snap hiss, the sound now forever associated with death in the minds of the surviving witnesses. But ultimately inadequate. Kravis drew his master-crafted bolt pistol and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. Blessed ammunition, each shell inscribed with prayers of banishment and loaded with diamantine-tipped penetrators. Vader's blade moved in a blur of red light. The first bolt was bisected mid-flight. Both halves detonated harmlessly to either side. The second met the same fate. The third, Vader caught with his outstretched hand, the bolt hanging suspended inches from his palm before dropping harmlessly to the ground, its propellant mysteriously exhausted. "Impressive reflexes," Kravis admitted, holstering his pistol. "If brute force failed, information warfare might succeed. Your abilities suggest Xenos origin, yet your physiology appears humanoid. Your vessel's construction is entirely unknown to Imperial records. You claim a title, Sith Lord, that exists in no xenological database. Explain yourself, and your cooperation will be noted in my report to the Holy Ordos." Vader's breathing continued its mechanical rhythm for 3 long cycles. 4. Then Vader nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. "Acceptable. Provide me with location data and tactical intelligence on the enemy force composition." As Delta 79 scrambled to upload the relevant data to a portable cogitator slate, Kravis allowed himself the ghost of a smile. If this Vader could eliminate the cult that had resisted 3 months of purge operations, the Inquisition would have proof of his capabilities. If he died in the attempt, the problem solved itself. And if he proved tractable, controllable, the Ordo Exynos would possess a weapon unlike any in the Imperial's vast arsenal. Vader accepted the data slate, his gloved fingers manipulating the interface with surprising dexterity despite their obvious mechanical nature. "Your heretics will be dead within the day." He turned and began walking toward his damaged shuttle, cape billowing behind him in the crater's residual thermals. Kravis watched him go, already composing his astropathic report to Inquisitor Lord Halthius. What Kravis didn't see, what he couldn't see, was the flicker of recognition in how Vader studied the data. cult hierarchy, religious fanaticism weaponized, blind obedience to a dark power. Vader had spent 20 years enforcing order for an emperor. This Imperium seemed little different. The only question was whether he would serve it or dominate it.
Hive Sigma 7 rose from Redemptus Sigma's equatorial wastes like a diseased tooth, its hair blocks stacked so densely that sunlight never reached the lower levels. 6 billion souls existed in its vertical sprawl, most of them unaware that the Hive's foundational sectors had been compromised by something far worse than mere poverty and decay. Vader's shuttle descended toward the Hive's industrial outskirts with damaged repulsor engines stuttering. The craft's controls felt sluggish, unresponsive, another reminder that he was stranded in an unfamiliar universe with degrading equipment. His armor's internal diagnostics painted a grim picture. Respiratory system functioning at 73% efficiency. Cybernetic neurointerfaces experiencing intermittent feedback loops. And his chest panel's life support regulators requiring recalibration within 48 hours. He needed the Mechanicus, which meant he needed to prove his value to these Imperials and their Inquisition. The Force rippled around him as he piloted the shuttle, his awareness extending outward like invisible fingers probing the Hive's psychic atmosphere. What he found made him pause. The structure wasn't just crowded with life, it writhed with something else. A presence. Multiple presences, actually, each one radiating corruption that felt simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Dark side energy, but wrong, chaotic, undisciplined. As though someone had taken the Sith philosophy of controlled passion and set it on fire, letting it burn without purpose or direction. The shuttle touched down in an abandoned cargo yard, its landing struts groaning under the uneven weight distribution. Vader emerged into air thick with industrial pollutants and the stench of organic decay. Rust-colored smog obscured the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a manufactory horn bellowed like a dying beast. According to the data slate, the cult's headquarters occupied a derelict cathedral 3 kilometers into the Hive's mid-levels. Former site of Imperial worship, now desecrated and transformed into something the Inquisitor's report had simply labeled heretical. The file included grainy pict captures, 8 pointed stars painted in blood, mutated cultists bearing weapons that seemed to pulse with unnatural life, and ritual chambers where the laws of physics appeared negotiable. Vader had seen planets consumed by Sith alchemy. He had watched the Emperor unleash Force lightning that could crack continents. But these images suggested something different. Not power harnessed through will and discipline, but power that consumed its wielders, transforming them into vessels for something beyond mortal comprehension. Interesting. He began walking toward the Hive entrance, his cape collecting rust-colored dust with each step. The lightsaber at his belt remained unignited but ready. His left hand flexed experimentally, testing the Force's responsiveness in this strange realm. A telekinetic pulse, a brief precognitive flash, a mental probe outward. All functional, though the feedback felt textured differently, as though he were manipulating the Force through a filter he couldn't quite identify.
The pervasive psychic static he'd noticed since arriving seemed to create interference patterns, making fine control more difficult, but raw power applications paradoxically easier. Adaptation would be necessary. Vader had rebuilt himself once before, after Mustafar's flames consumed his body. He would rebuild his understanding of power here as well. The hive entrance was a massive blast door, currently stuck half open and guarded by nothing except rust and abandonment. Vader passed through into corridors lit by failing lumens that flickered erratically. Graffiti covered the walls, Imperial slogans defaced with crude symbols, prayers to their God Emperor scratched out and replaced with phrases in a language that hurt to read. The words seemed to writhe when viewed directly, as though rejecting observation. 20 minutes into the hive, Vader encountered his first cultists. They emerged from side passages like vermin, their bodies twisted by mutation. Extra limbs sprouted from torsos. Faces bore too many eyes or mouths that split vertically instead of horizontally. Some wore the remnants of Imperial Guard uniforms, others the ragged jumpsuits of hive workers. All of them carried weapons, improvised blades, autoguns, or in one case, an arm that had been replaced entirely by something resembling a writhing tentacle tipped with bone spurs. "Fresh meat for the blood god," one of them shrieked, the words emerging as a wet gurgle through a throat that had split into 3 separate voice boxes. They charged with mindless fury, no tactics or coordination, just raw aggression channeled through corrupted flesh. Vader's lightsaber ignited. The crimson blade hummed to life, and in 3 economical movements, 5 cultists fell in pieces. The superheated blade cauterized as it cut, leaving smoking wounds that smelled of burned meat, and something sharper, more acrid, as though their very blood had turned to poison. The remaining cultists hesitated, animal cunning warring with chemically induced bloodlust. Vader extended his left hand and unleashed a force push that sent 6 of them flying backward. They hit the corridor walls with bone-shattering force, bodies crumpling like discarded dolls. One survivor remained, a grotesquely muscular brute wielding a chainsword that roared with mechanical hunger. The cultist charged with surprising speed. Vader sidestepped the downward chop, his precognitive sense reading the attack before it fully developed, and drove his lightsaber through the cultist's torso. The blade emerged from the creature's back, and for one moment Vader stared into eyes that held no sanity, only infinite rage and something like ecstasy. The cultist died smiling. Vader withdrew his blade and continued deeper into the hive, following the data slate's directions and the growing concentration of corrupted force signatures. More cultists came, and he cut them down with mechanical efficiency. Some exploded when killed, their bodies rupturing into clouds of flies or pools of blood that tried to crawl toward him with pseudopodic determination. Others simply fell, their mutations collapsing into inert meat. After the 3rd ambush, Vader began to understand the nature of his opponents. They weren't soldiers. They were fanatics who had surrendered individuality for communion with something vast and hungry. Their attacks weren't tactical. They were offerings, sacrifices made to feed whatever power they serve. In that respect, they reminded him of the Emperor's hands, or the inquisitorious agents who served Palpatine with blind devotion. Useful tools, easily discarded. The cathedral emerged from the hive's gloom like a fever dream. Its architecture had been imperial once, high vaulted ceilings, buttresses designed to inspire awe at humanity's achievements. Now, those same buttresses bore chains from which hung corpses in various states of decay. The vaulted ceiling had been painted with scenes of carnage, so detailed that Vader's helmet optics struggled to process the sheer volume of depicted violence. And at the cathedral center, kneeling before an altar made of fused bones and still beating hearts, was the cult leader. He turned as Vader entered, and the Dark Lord saw a man who had long since been entirely human. Horns curved from his skull like a crown of bone. His skin had been flayed away in ritual patterns, replaced by something that resembled raw muscle wrapped in brass wire. Wings, actual leathery wings, sprouted from his back, vestigial but unmistakably real.
Another offering from the false emperor's servants, the cult leader said, his voice resonating with multiple tones simultaneously. How generous. Khorne will feast well tonight. Vader ignited his lightsaber, the crimson blade casting bloody light across the desecrated cathedral. I serve no emperor but myself, and your life ends here. The cult leader laughed, a sound like bones breaking in sequence. Arrogant. I like that. The blood god appreciates confidence. He rose to his feet, drawing a sword that wept blood from its blade even while sheathed. Let me show you what true power looks like in this universe, stranger. The temperature in the cathedral dropped 10 degrees as reality bent around the cult leader. The air took on a metallic taste, copper and iron and something fouler. Behind him, the altar's beating hearts began to pulse in synchronized rhythm, and from the walls themselves, shapes began to emerge. Humanoid, but wrong. Flesh the color of dried blood. Horns, fangs, and an aura of violence so pure it made the air vibrate. Demons. The data slate had mentioned them, but Vader had dismissed it as superstition or metaphor. Now he understood. In this universe, faith and nightmare were tangible forces, and he stood in a temple dedicated to making both manifest. The cult leader charged, his demon blade screaming for blood. Vader met him with the precision of Form V, blade work honed over decades of lightsaber combat. Their weapons met with a sound like reality tearing, and the cathedral exploded into violence. The demon blade struck sparks against Vader's lightsaber in a shower of reality-defying pyrotechnics. Each impact sent feedback through the Force, as though the weapon itself was trying to corrupt the energy that bound the lightsaber together. Vader felt the disturbance, a presence behind the blade that was simultaneously intelligent and mindlessly destructive, aware yet chaotic. This was not a simple enchantment. This was a living weapon, and it hungered. The cult leader fought with inhuman speed, his mutated physiology granting strength that should have been impossible for his frame. He swung the demon blade in wide arcs designed to overwhelm through sheer aggression.
each strike accompanied by guttural war cries that seemed to resonate with the beating hearts on the altar. Vader parried, sidestepped, and analyzed. Form V was built on economy of motion and devastating counterattacks. Let the opponent expend energy, find the opening, exploit weakness with surgical precision. The cult leader overextended on a downward chop. Vader sidestepped and drove his lightsaber through the cultist's right wing. The appendage separated with a spray of blood that hissed when it struck the ground, burning through stone like acid. The cult leader roared, not in pain, but in exultation. Yes, blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. He spun impossibly fast and backhanded Vader with his free hand. The impact sent the Sith Lord sliding backward 15 feet, his armor's ablative plating absorbing most of the kinetic force, but leaving a visible dent in the chest piece. Warning indicators flashed across his helmet's HUD. Structural integrity compromised, respirator efficiency down to 68%. The demons that had emerged from the walls began to circle, their movements predatory and patient despite the bestial fury radiating from their forms. 8 of them, each bearing weapons that looked grown rather than forged. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they moved in a synchronized pattern, their footsteps echoing in rhythm with the altar's pulsing hearts. A ritual. They were performing a ritual, using the combat itself as a focus for something larger. Vader reached out through the Force, feeling the currents of power flowing through the cathedral. The altar was the nexus, fed by the deaths of countless victims whose terror and agony had been weaponized into psychic fuel. The demons were manifestations of that fuel, given form through collective belief and something else. A realm beyond the physical, pressing against reality like a tumor. The warp. That's what the Inquisitor's data slate had called it. An immaterial dimension where thought and emotion became tangible forces, where gods were real because enough people believed them to be. How utterly fascinating, and how utterly exploitable. Your god feeds on death, Vader observed, his mechanical breathing steady despite the adrenaline his organic components were producing. But death is merely a tool, one I have mastered. He thrust his left hand toward the nearest demon. The force surged outward, seizing the creature in an invisible grip. The demon struggled, its physical strength considerable. But strength meant nothing against telekinetic pressure applied to its internal structure. Vader clenched his fist, and the demon's torso imploded. The creature burst into flames that burned with unnatural colors, purple, green, orange, before vanishing entirely, leaving behind only the stench of sulfur. The remaining demon shrieked and charged as one. Vader's lightsaber became a crimson blur, intercepting claws and weapons with deflections that sent demon ichor spraying across the cathedral floor. He gave ground deliberately, drawing them toward a collapsed section of buttress where rubble had piled against the wall. At the last moment, he leaped, augmented legs and force-enhanced reflexes carrying him 10 feet straight up. He landed on the rubble pile as the demons crashed into each other below him, their momentum turning their coordinated assault into a chaotic tangle of limbs and fury. Vader extended both hands. The Force answered with a fury that surprised even him. In his own galaxy, such an application of power would have required intense focus and drained his reserves significantly. Here, with the warp pressing against reality and psychic energy saturating every atom of air, the Force felt amplified, as though the very universe was eager to comply with his will. The cult leader charged, his demon blade screaming for blood. Vader met him with the precision of Form V, blade work honed over decades of lightsaber combat. Their weapons met with a sound like reality tearing, and the cathedral exploded into violence. The demon blade struck sparks against Vader's lightsaber in a shower of reality-defying pyrotechnics. Each impact sent feedback through the Force, as though the weapon itself was trying to corrupt the energy that bound the lightsaber together. Vader felt the disturbance, a presence behind the blade that was simultaneously intelligent and mindlessly destructive, aware, yet chaotic. This was not a simple enchantment. This was a living weapon, and it hungered. The cult leader fought with inhuman speed, his mutated physiology granting strength that should have been impossible for his frame. He swung the demon blade in wide arcs designed to overwhelm through sheer aggression, each strike accompanied by guttural war cries that seemed to resonate with the beating hearts on the altar. Vader parried, sidestepped, and analyzed. Form V was built on economy of motion and devastating counterattacks. Let the opponent expend energy, find the opening, exploit weakness with surgical precision. The cult leader overextended on a downward chop. Vader sidestepped and drove his lightsaber through the cultist's right wing. The appendage separated with a spray of blood that hit.
The rubble pile detonated outward. Tons of rockcrete and twisted metal became projectiles traveling at lethal velocity. 3 demons were pulverized immediately, their manifested forms unable to withstand the physical trauma. 2 more were pinned beneath heavy debris, struggling and shrieking. The remaining pair retreated toward the altar, their bestial cunning recognizing a threat beyond their ability to counter. The cult leader watched all of this with eyes that had gone entirely crimson, pupils replaced by burning vertical slits. Impressive. Perhaps Tsench would have appreciated you, sorcerer. But you face a champion of Khorne, and we do not fall to tricks. He raised his demon blade skyward and began chanting in a language that made Vader's translator circuit scream with error codes. The blade's weeping intensified, blood pouring from it in impossible quantities, pooling on the floor and flowing toward the altar. The beating hearts accelerated their rhythm, pounding faster and faster until they blurred together into a single continuous roar. The air split open. Not a doorway or portal in the conventional sense. Reality simply tore, like fabric pulled beyond its tensile strength. Through the wound in space, Vader glimpsed something that his mind struggled to categorize. A dimension of pure violence. An ocean of blood beneath brass citadels where war raged eternally. And something vast turning its attention toward this tiny cathedral on this insignificant forge world.
a presence of such focused rage that even Vader, who had knelt before the dark side's most corrupting influences, felt a moment of genuine wariness. "Khorne!" the cult leader screamed. "Accept this warrior's skull as offering. Grant me the strength to claim it." The cult leader's body began to expand. Muscles bulged grotesquely, splitting skin and replacing it with brass-colored scales. His remaining wing grew to functional size, and a second one erupted from his back in a spray of bone fragments. The demon blade fused with his hand, becoming part of his flesh. He stood now at nearly 9 feet tall, a creature of pure martial fury, given monstrous form. Vader assessed the situation with clinical detachment. This, Khorne, was granting its champion a direct infusion of power, transforming him into something beyond mortal limitations. The transformation came with a cost. The cult leader's eyes showed no higher thought anymore, only an animalistic need to kill and maim. Strength without discipline, power without purpose, the antithesis of everything the Sith philosophy represented. Vader would not kneel to this blood-soaked deity. He would not serve another master, whether it called itself Emperor, Sith Lord, or Chaos God. He had broken his chains once. He would not forge new ones. The transformed champion charged with speed that should have been impossible for something so massive. Vader met the charge not with his lightsaber, but with the full force of his telekinetic might. He caught the champion mid-leap, suspending the creature in mid-air through sheer force application. The champion struggled, demon blade swinging wildly, wings beating with hurricane force. Vader walked forward slowly, his mechanical breathing the only sound in the cathedral besides the champion's frustrated roars. He extended his awareness through the force, feeling the connection between the champion and the wound in reality. A psychic tether pulsing with crimson energy, feeding power from that blood-soaked dimension into the champion's transformed body. Connections could be severed. Vader reached out with the force and grasped that tether. It resisted. This was not simple matter to be manipulated, but the raw substance of belief and emotion given form. Yet Vader had strangled admirals across light years of space and crushed the throats of rebel leaders through holographic transmission. Distance and immateriality were no obstacle to a Sith Lord's will. He pulled. The tether snapped. The champion's transformation reversed in an instant, his body collapsing back to merely human proportions, the brass scales flaking away like diseased skin. The demon blade crumbled to rust, and the wound in reality sealed shut with a sound like a universe exhaling. The cult leader fell to his knees, suddenly mortal again, his eyes clearing enough to show comprehension of what had just occurred. "Impossible," he whispered. "The gods, they do not abandon their chosen." "Your gods have no power over me," Vader stated. He ignited his lightsaber and placed the blade against the cult leader's throat. "I have rejected one emperor. I will not submit to another, regardless of what name it wears." He drove the blade home. The cult leader collapsed, his body finally finding the death it had been denied through demonic patronage. The cathedral fell silent. The altar's heart stopped beating. The remaining pinned demons dissolved into psychic residue that evaporated within seconds. Vader stood alone among the carnage, his armor damaged, his respirator struggling, but victorious. His comlink crackled to life, the Inquisitor's frequency. "Lord Vader, respond. Are you successful?" Vader surveyed the desecrated cathedral one final time before answering. "The cult is eliminated. Send your Mechanicus technicians to my coordinates. We have an arrangement to fulfill."
The Mechanicus delegation arrived at dawn, such as dawn existed on a forge world, where the sun was perpetually filtered through layers of industrial haze. Archmagos Deltrian IX led the procession, his augmented frame a testament to the Omnissiah's glory. More machine than man, with dendrite appendages flowing from his back like mechanical tentacles, and a cranium replaced entirely by a cogitator array that pulsed with binaric cant. Vader stood outside the desecrated cathedral, his damaged armor illuminated by the rising sun's rust-colored light. Behind him, the building smoldered. He had set the altar ablaze with controlled application of the Force, ensuring no psychic residue remained to spawn further corruption. The flames had burned with unnatural colors before finally settling into conventional orange-red, as though reality itself was relieved to return to normal parameters. Inquisitor Cravus accompanied the Mechanicus delegation, his expression unreadable behind his peaked cap and the surgical mask that covered the lower half of his face. He surveyed the cathedral's destruction with professional assessment, his augmetic eye whirring as it captured detailed recordings. "Comprehensive," Cravus observed. "The cult is not merely defeated, it has been eradicated root and stem. Even the psychic contamination has been cleansed." He turned to Vader with something that might have been respect. "You exceeded expectations, Lord Vader." "I completed the task as specified," Vader replied, his mechanical breathing steady despite his respirator's declining efficiency. Internal diagnostics showed 52% functionality now, critically low. Your Mechanicus will now fulfill their end of the arrangement. Archmagos Deltrian IX approached with movements that seemed to glide rather than walk, his anti-grav stabilizers compensating for his considerable augmented mass. When he spoke, his voice emerged as a synthesized approximation of High Gothic layered with machine code harmonics. "Lord Vader, your cybernetic integration is unprecedented. By the Omnissiah's grace, we shall render sacred maintenance." The Archmagos's optical sensors focused on Vader's chest panel, where warning lights blinked with increasing urgency. "Your machine spirit suffers. This cannot be tolerated." Vader studied the Archmagos with careful attention. In his own galaxy, those who worshipped technology as religion were either primitive cultists or academic eccentrics. Here, they represented the pinnacle of technical expertise, their faith and knowledge intertwined so completely that one could not exist without the other. Fascinating and potentially useful.
I require immediate stabilization of my respiratory system, Vader stated, transmitting a diagnostic readout from his armor systems to the Archmagos via local data tether. Secondary priority is structural repair to my cybernetic limbs and sensory systems. The transit that brought me here caused cascade failures throughout multiple subsystems. Deltrian Ninth processed the data in microseconds, his cogitator arrays working at speeds that would shame any unaugmented human mind. When he responded, his synthesized voice carried undertones that Vader recognized as reverence. Technology of unknown origin. Machine spirits unlike any in the Omnissiah's archives. This is sacred knowledge, Lord Vader. You are a walking shrine to undiscovered principles. The Archmagos' dendrites extended toward Vader in a gesture that seemed almost pleading. Permit us to study. Permit us to learn. In exchange, we shall restore your systems to full operational capacity. Vader considered the offer carefully. These Mechanicus adepts possessed technological sophistication comparable to the Empire's finest engineers, perhaps even superior in certain applications. Their fusion of faith and science created a unique approach to problem solving that might prove advantageous. But allowing them complete access to his systems meant revealing vulnerabilities, exposing the mechanisms that kept him alive. Trust was a commodity Vader had learned to spend sparingly. You may repair and stabilize, Vader said finally, but the core architecture of my systems remains sealed. You will work from specifications I provide, not through invasive analysis. Deltrian Ninth's optical sensors flickered, disappointment perhaps, or calculation. Acceptable. The Omnissiah teaches patience. Sacred knowledge reveals itself to those who serve with faith. The Mechanicus team moved with surprising efficiency, establishing a mobile repair facility within the cathedral's outer structure. Servitors hauled equipment while tech priests chanted binaric prayers over sanctified tools. Within the hour, Vader found himself seated on a reinforced examination platform while multiple augmented hands worked across his armor surface, conducting diagnostics that made his systems hum with foreign energy signatures. Inquisitor Kravus observed from a respectful distance, his arms crossed and his expression thoughtful. After 20 minutes of silence, broken only by machine cant and the hiss of welding torches, he approached. You severed a demonic connection, Kravus said without preamble. My Auspex readings from outside the cathedral detected the moment Khorne's influence was cut. That should be impossible without sanctified weapons, psychic wards, or a direct intervention from the Emperor himself. Your Emperor does not hold monopoly on power, Vader replied, his breathing slightly easier now as the tech priest stabilized his respirator's primary functions. The Force, my connection to the energy that binds all living things, operates on principles your Empire does not understand. Your warp is similar, but fundamentally different. The Force, Kravus repeated, testing the word. And this force allowed you to manipulate reality without drawing from the Imperium, without risking demonic possession or psychic backlash? The Force is a tool. Like any tool, it reflects the will of its wielder. Vader's hand flexed, testing the newly calibrated servos in his mechanical fingers. Your psychers appear to channel power they do not fully control, opening themselves to corruption. I do not channel. I command. The Force bends to my will, or it breaks. Kravis absorbed this information with the hungry intensity of a man whose life's work involved cataloging Xenos threats. If your abilities could be replicated, studied, weaponized, the Empire would possess an advantage against chaos unlike anything in our 10,000-year history. My abilities cannot be replicated through your technology, Vader stated flatly. The Force requires aptitude, training, and discipline. Your Empire's approach to psychic phenomenon, suppress, control, or destroy, would prevent the development necessary to achieve mastery. Fascinating, and potentially useful. Then what do you propose? Kravis asked. You have proven your combat effectiveness. The Ordo Exynos would offer significant resources in exchange for your continued cooperation. You could be granted inquisitorial authority, access to Imperial military assets, even a ship to facilitate your objectives. Vader turned his masked face toward the Inquisitor, studying him through the Force. Kravis's emotions were disciplined, controlled, but beneath the surface churned ambition, curiosity, and a pragmatism that bordered on ruthlessness. Here was a man who would sacrifice anything, including his own principles, if it served the Imperium's survival. A man Vader could work with, or destroy, if necessary. I do not serve, Vader said quietly, his mechanical voice carrying absolute conviction. I am not your weapon to deploy at will, Inquisitor. However, our interests may align temporarily. I require resources to understand this universe and determine whether return to my own galaxy is possible. You require a force capable of confronting threats your conventional methods cannot address. An alliance of convenience, Kravis observed. A partnership of mutual benefit, Vader corrected. I will assist in eliminating threats to this Forge world and surrounding systems. In exchange, you will provide me with information, resources, and access to your most advanced technology. When I have determined my course of action, this arrangement may continue or conclude based on circumstance. Kravis was silent for a long moment, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Finally, he extended his hand, a gesture of agreement, Vader surmised from observing similar interactions during his brief time in this universe. Vader grasped the offered hand. Not submission, not servitude. A compact between powers, temporary and contingent. There is one condition, Kravis added. You will accompany me to speak with Inquisitor Lord Haltheus via astropathic relay. He leads the Ordo Xenos in this sector, and any arrangement of this magnitude requires his authorization. Acceptable, Vader replied, releasing the handshake. Archmagos Deltrian IX approached, his optical sensors glowing with satisfaction. Primary repairs complete. Respiratory function restored to 87% efficiency. Structural integrity of cybernetic systems improved 43%. You may continue operations without immediate risk of catastrophic failure. Vader stood, testing his restored systems. His breathing came easier now, the mechanical rhythm stronger and more stable. His limbs responded with precision that had been absent since his arrival. The force flowed through him with renewed clarity, no longer fighting against the interference of malfunctioning cybernetics. He was not whole. True wholeness had been denied him since Mustafar. But he was functional, dangerous, ready to carve out a position in this new galaxy through the only currencies that mattered: power and will. Lord Vader, Kravis said, gesturing toward a waiting transport. Welcome to the Imperium of Man, humanity's last bastion against the darkness. Vader looked out across the Forge World's landscape. Endless manufacturums belching smoke into a poison sky. Hive cities where billions lived in squalor, serving a distant emperor they would never see. A civilization built on faith, fear, and the grinding machinery of perpetual war. It reminded him of the Empire, of Palpatine's vision made manifest across 1,000,000 worlds. He had helped build that empire once, had enforced its will with ruthless efficiency, and in the end, it had cost him everything: his body, his identity, even the son he never knew until it was too late. Here, in this grim darkness of the 41st millennium, perhaps he would find not redemption. That commodity held no value to a Sith Lord, but purpose, a reason to exist beyond mere survival. Or perhaps he will simply do what he had always done: impose order through strength, enforce will through power, and remind this universe that some forces cannot be contained by faith alone. The Imperium, Vader repeated, his mechanical breathing punctuating each word. We shall see if it proves more durable than the empire I once served. He walked toward the transport, cape billowing in the toxic wind, a dark lord of the Sith carrying his singular darkness into a universe already drowning in it. Behind him, the cathedral's flames finally extinguished themselves, leaving only ash and the memory of corruption purged through superior violence. The Emperor might protect, as these Imperials claim, but Vader would enforce. And in the 41st millennium, where there was only war, that distinction would matter more than faith ever could. In the months that followed, Lord Vader became a figure of whispered legend across Redemptus Sigma and the surrounding systems. Not a hero, the Imperium had no use for such idealism. Not a saint. His methods were far too pragmatic and brutal for canonization. He was simply a force, like gravity or entropy, reshaping the sector through applications of power that defied conventional categorization. The Mechanicus offered him a forge temple where his damaged shuttle was slowly restored using a fusion of Imperial technology and his own specifications. They worshipped him from a distance, these red-robed priests, seeing in his cybernetics the Omnissiah's hidden wisdom. He tolerated their devotion because it proved useful, extracting technical knowledge and resources while revealing only fragments of his capabilities. Inquisitor Kravis became something approaching an ally, though neither man trusted the other completely. Together, they purged 3 more cult infestations, dismantled a Genestealer infiltration network, and even negotiated an uneasy truce with a rogue trader dynasty whose interests aligned temporarily with Imperial security. Vader's reputation grew. The Black Exarch, some called him. The Emperor's dark hand, others whispered, though he rejected any suggestion of divine mandate. He was no one's hand. No one's servant. Not anymore. The question of return haunted him during long nights in the Forge Temple, when his meditation revealed no path home through the Force. This universe operated on different principles, its faster-than-light travel dependent on a psychic realm that felt like the dark side's malevolent cousin. Perhaps he was stranded permanently, cut off from everything he had known. Or perhaps this was opportunity, a chance to build something new, unburdened by Palpatine's shadow or the rebellion's judgment. In the 41st millennium, power was the only currency that mattered, and Vader possessed power in abundance. The Imperium will learn this truth, as will its enemies. Lord Vader had awakened in a new galaxy, and whether it bent to his will or broke beneath it would be decided by the same principle that had governed his entire existence: strength wielded without hesitation, purpose pursued without mercy, and the absolute certainty that in the darkness between
stars, only the powerful survived. The Emperor might protect his faithful, but the Sith Lord would forge his own destiny.